And we are live. And today we're going to talk about authenticity. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that often I show up in kind of crazy hats and doing different things. And sometimes I talk about things, and you may be kind of scratching your head wondering, what is he really talking about? Well, today I want to talk about authenticity, being authentic, being uniquely you. And I'm going to use some things from pop culture around singers, songwriters, and kind of share some of that to help make the point today. Now, often when I do the videos, I don't really share why I'm doing things. And today, I thought I would actually be a little bit more direct and explain what I'm doing too. Okay, so first off, uh, if you're watching the video, right, you're looking at me and thinking, who is this mountain man that's all dressed up the way that he is, right? Well, I purposely today did not comb my hair, comb my beard. I didn't wear anything in particular. I didn't take off my nice warm hat. I just showed up the way that I am today because that is part of authenticity, right? And so, uh, you know, I'm looking the way that I do because this is who I am. If you were to come over to my house this morning, you'd see me just like this. And so I don't necessarily want to put on a mask or show up maybe the way you would expect me to. Instead, if I'm being authentic, I need to show up the way that I am. This is the way that I am this morning. Okay. So I'm doing that on purpose. I am wearing a ridiculous hat and I'm still in my coat and I'm not all professional looking. And guess what? That's on purpose, right? Because I'm trying to make a point. I'm showing you by my example, maybe a little bit more how you can be authentic. And so again, I'm gonna share with you some stories in today's video. And the fact that you're watching this video means there's something in here for you. I don't know what it is because for each person, right, what you're going to get out of this video is slightly different. But the fact that you're watching it means there's something in here for you. Okay. Now, I'm recording this live as well. So if you're, on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn and you're watching this live, you can put comments in and we can have a little bit of an exchange as well. But, as you're listening to this too, if this is helpful for you, make sure and subscribe and like and comment and all those good things as well, because I'm going to start talking a lot more about this. And here's one of the reasons is there's a lot of people who are starting to talk about authenticity and being authentic. But if you look at them, they're not really being authentic. Okay. And so I want to show or provide another example of what it can be. Because I think, a lot of times we spend our whole life trying to be someone else, trying to be someone we think other people will love, trying to be someone that we think other people will like. But the reality is, until we are actually authentic professionally and personally, it causes us a lot of pain. Why? Because we're pretending to be somebody that we're not. And anytime we do that, that creates cognitive dissonance in our life and leads to things like depression and fear and other things that I don't want to deal with, and I don't want you to deal with either. Okay, so let's start talking about singers and songwriters. And I love taking examples specifically from music, from pop culture, from movies, because they show stories and they're trying to teach us things that often we don't actually realize that they're doing. Okay, and I think this is a good way of kind of an introduction into some of this topic. Now, 100 years ago, if you were going to go listen to music, you would have to go to a bar or a concert or something like that, because most music was performed live. Maybe if you had a radio at that time, 100 years ago, people started having radios, because I think it was around 1914 or 1917, something like that, that radio was invented. But really, most people didn't have access to music in their homes until after the Second World War, when people started making albums. People bought, record machines and other things like that. It was around before, but, for most people, it really wasn't until after that point. And something interesting happened in music around that time, which is, again, this whole business of the music industry kind of grew up. And so these music companies, their intention was to make money, right? And so they would put together musical acts, they would record music, they would sell albums to people that they thought people wanted to listen to. And that's kind of where the idea of pop music came from, which pop music actually stands for popular music, right? It's music that was popular with people. Okay. And so when that started, there was, again, these companies were trying to find a formula so they could make money. And so often what they would do is someone would write a song. The person who writes a song is called a songwriter, right? They're the ones that write the song. They might write the music, they might write the lyrics, they might do both, they might do one or the other, right? And they were the ones who would kind of create the music. And then what would happen is the music companies would go find someone who was pretty or handsome. They would put them in a costume. They were somebody who could sing well, and they would have those singers sing the songs that the songwriters wrote. Okay. Now, often in the mornings, I wake up and I have a song in my head. And yesterday it was a Carole King song. I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling down, tumbling down. Okay. So you might know that song. Now, Carole King was a songwriter. And so she wrote lots of songs that were actually recorded by other singing acts. A lot of times there was a formula of, 3 or 4 women or 3 or 4 men that were put together, or a group of men and women who could sing well, and they'd kind of doo-wop and, kind of move around. Think back in the 50s and early 60s. And you can come to mind with a lot of people who were in that way. Now, they were not the ones who were writing the songs. They were just performing the songs. And sometimes when they would perform the songs, they would pretty much just copy what was down. Others actually made it more their own. And so there is a difference there between someone who is performing a song that was written by somebody else versus somebody who, and making it their own, versus someone who is just copying. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit more as we get going. So, like I said, there were singers, there were songwriters. Now, what happened in kind of the late 50s, early to mid 60s was a lot of these songwriters, started to see that, hey, I'm a songwriter, but why don't I perform my own songs? And a lot of people in the music industry pushed back on that, didn't want that, because a lot of the people who wrote the songs were not as handsome or as pretty as the acts that they wanted to put ahead of them. In fact, sometimes the people who were songwriters were not even necessarily that good of a singer, right? And so they were afraid that, hey, if we do this, then people aren't going to buy the record album. And Carole King was an example of that, right? Carole was a songwriter. She wrote lots of songs. There were many people like her at the time who wrote songs that other people performed. And you can always tell, I use Apple Music, but in a lot of the things that you listen to, when you get down to the bottom of the song, you can actually see who wrote it. And it's always interesting to see who wrote the song. How many musicians actually are recording music that they wrote versus they're just recording something somebody else wrote. Okay. So, as I said, a lot of the people in the music industry were like, no, we can't do this because we're not going to be able to sell albums. Well, I think Carole King has done pretty well for herself performing her own songs. Another example is Bob Dylan, which is why I put him, in kind of the title here. And the idea of boy bands versus Dylan, right? And what do they have in common? Well, from my opinion, right, boy bands are fake. Dylan is authentic. Now, why? Okay. Well, again, the boy bands, especially those that were, around the early 90s, I want to say late 80s, 90s, somewhere in that range. A lot of them were kind of following that music industry formula. They would find, some boys that were attractive, that the girls would think were hot and would like to see. They could sing well. And so they created bands like the Backstreet Boys and Boys to Men and some other different groups at that time, right? And again, I'm not saying they're not good musicians. I'm just saying there's a big difference between a boy band that is created to sing someone else's songs and someone like Bob Dylan who writes and sings his own songs. Now, Dylan actually wrote songs for a lot of other people as well. But as you can see, being authentic, singing, performing your own music as someone like Bob Dylan or Carole King, it works, right? Why? Now, some people might look at Dylan and say, well, he doesn't know how to sing. He doesn't have a very good voice. And there's maybe a lot of people out there who don't like Bob Dylan. But I'll tell you, there's millions of people who do, who appreciate his songwriting skills, that appreciate the lyrics that he comes up with, and even the music that he does. And whether he is the best singer in the world or not, right, it's authentic. When Bob Dylan plays his music, it's authentic because it's something that he has written from the heart. It's something that he performs in the way that he envisioned it. And because of that, there's more of an authentic feel to it than someone else who is just recording something that Dylan wrote. Now, again, sometimes, musicians will cover, it's what's called a cover, other people's songs that they have written. And sometimes, in my opinion, the covers are better than the original. The covers feel better to me, right? In fact, one of them that is that way for me is there's a song called "Hurt" that Nine Inch Nails recorded, and I can't remember the guy from Nine Inch Nails who wrote it. I can't remember his name, but he wrote that song "Hurt," and Nine Inch Nails released it. And towards the end of Johnny Cash's life, they asked if he could record "Hurt." And if you've ever heard Johnny Cash's version of "Hurt," it's like that song was written for him. It explained his life. It showed the hurt and the pain that he felt. He made that song his own. And to me, his recording of that version is much more authentic because it's very soulful. It's from his heart. It's showing who he is and the pain and the hurt that he has gone through in his life, right? And so to me, I wouldn't say that Johnny Cash was not being authentic. I would say he's being very authentic. Even though he's using, right, a song that someone else has written, he made it his own. And so, in this, I want to ask you some questions as well, right? Because, a lot of us like to think we're being authentic, but sometimes we're not. And so, are you just copying other people because you want the same success or fame that they have? You want to make money like they make? Or are you doing it from your heart? Again, maybe you get an idea from somebody else, but then you make it your own, right? You do what Johnny Cash did. You make that song your own because it really comes from your heart, right? Another example is the song Woodstock that Joni Mitchell wrote. Joni Mitchell, great singer songwriter, right? She's written a lot of great music. She performed a lot of her own music, but then other people would uh, end up recording it themselves, doing a cover of her music. And honestly, a lot of the covers of Joni's work I like better, but that's just me, right? Other people love her work, and Woodstock is one of those songs. So she recorded it. She didn't end up getting to go to Woodstock for some different reasons, but she recorded it, and the feel that she was able to kind of channel about what happened at Woodstock, a lot of people said Joni captured what happened at Woodstock better than those of us who were there could even explain it, and she wasn't even there. But Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were friends of Joni. In fact, she was dating one of the members, and they recorded it. Right, and I like their version better. That's just me, right? But they took it, they made it their own in the own Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young way. Uh, you know, it's got a very different feel to it, and Hendrix actually even helped on that arrangement. And so, to me, I like that. I like their version better, but that's more because of what I personally like. Well, last night, a friend and I were playing around with Woodstock, and we created a new version. Still Joni's music, or still her uh, words, still the basic kind of music behind it, but we created something that is our own, something that is unique, something that didn't exist before, right? And so we're making that our own in the way that we actually are performing it, right? And so, as you can see, it's like, I'll give another example, because I think what ends up happening so much of the time is at first we try to imitate other people. We try to maybe copy other people, or we try to put on a mask because that's what we're told will make us successful, right? And so you can even see from the Beatles. And again, the Beatles, probably one of the greatest bands of all time, in terms of number of sales, in terms of their evolution, in terms of their impact on society, on music, on everything else. Now, the Beatles wrote their own music, but at the beginning, in the early 60s, when they started having some commercial success, again, the record companies wanted to show them in a certain light. So they dressed them up in these suits that looked the same, right? With the little narrow ties, dark suit, white shirt. You go back and you can see a lot of their early recordings. That's how they were dressed. They were put in costumes, right? But they were still performing their own music. It was music that they wrote, music that they performed, but they were put in these monkey suits, right? They were put in these suits that was not necessarily who they were. And a lot of their early music was very pop, doo-wop, boop, 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 boop kind of stuff, right? But what you could see from the evolution of the Beatles is they became much more authentic. They showed who they were as individuals, right? Because after a few years, you can notice they dropped the suits. They started growing their hair longer. They each wore whatever it was that they wanted to wear. They started taking risks in the music that they were creating. They would look at people like the Beach Boys and see what they were coming out with, and they would build upon that, right? And they would create something new that was unique to themselves based on some inspiration from others, right? But they would then record it. They would be who they were, right? And so you could see again from an evolution perspective, they were singers, they were songwriters too, but you could see how they started becoming more and more themselves. They were being themselves. The Beatles are unique. There's no other band that has ever existed like them. Now, at the beginning, right, when they first started having success, there were a lot of other bands like the Beatles. The music companies put together other people, dressed them similar, had them do music that was very similar to a lot of the Beatles' music, and they had some commercial success with it, right? But those other bands didn't last. Why? Because that's not who they were, right? They weren't necessarily authentic. They were just copying what the Beatles had done, as opposed to the Beatles kept reinventing themselves along the way, right? And that's really what happens with us, even as we become more authentic. You know, we all grow up, we're told, you have to do this, be a good boy, do this, you have to believe this, you have to dress this certain way. But a lot of us then spend the rest of our life learning who we really are and stepping into who we really are, right? And so, again, that's why I'm doing this, why I'm talking more about it, because I've been on this journey as well, right? When I started my business 14 years ago, whatever it was, I felt like I had to show up in a suit and tie in order for people to listen to me, in order for people to think I was professional, in order for people to pay me money, right? I was concerned about that. And so I continued to wear a suit and tie. Now, I twisted it a little bit because I'm like, hey, everybody else is wearing a regular tie. I'm going to wear a bow tie. I'm going to be a little bit different, but I'm still going to be the same, right? I was trying to be unique, but I was still conforming. And, the older that I've gotten, the more I've realized I'm not really a suit and tie guy, right? That's not who I am. I like t-shirts. I like, other things instead more than wearing a suit and tie. And so if you've noticed the evolution of me, if you've been following me for years, you've seen that my style has changed, if you will. Why? Because I'm trying to be more authentic, right? I started growing this beard. Never had a beard before. Right. I was always told that, you need to shave every day and be clean shaven and look professional. Well, I want to grow a beard. I want to try it out. I want to be different. Right. And some people may understand, some people may like what I'm doing, other people may not. And that's okay, because I just have to do what I feel like is right for me. Try to be the most authentic part of me that I can be. And learn what that is, learn about myself, know myself better, start living that way so I don't have that cognitive dissonance in my life, right? And so I'm hoping that, again, if you're watching this, that you're maybe thinking the same thing. You're like, I'm tired of pretending, to be somebody that I'm not, just to try to make people like me that really don't love me anyway, right? But we find ourselves in that. And I think so much of the time when we start to wake up, people put a label on it, like, oh, you're having a midlife crisis, right? No, I'm actually just learning who I am and want to be who I am. And even though that's different than who I've been for the last 20 years, I feel better about it, right? And so that's what I want for you, if that's what you want. So again, some questions to maybe ask yourself, are you living authentic? Well, I don't know. You have to ask yourself some of these questions. Do you feel that way? Or do you feel like you have to get up in the morning, you have to put on makeup, you have to dress a certain way before you can interact with other people, right? Do you feel like you have to put on a show, like you have to be an actor, right? So that other people will like you? Is that what you're doing? Or are you actually being who you are, right? And showing up, hey, like today, I roll out of bed, here I am. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just showing up as I am right now. Now, other times when I do videos, I'm going to wear a different hat. I might have some other clothes on, and that's okay, because again, I'm going to show up the way that I am, right? Now, as we kind of wrap up, for today, and like I said, I'm going to do more videos like this, but I want to share another example, and it's from the movie Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages. I think it was 2012. Tom Cruise was in it, and anyway, it was I thought a pretty well done movie in taking some different rock and roll songs and trying to create a story around it. And the story kind of goes like this. There's a boy and a girl, and they end up in Hollywood, and they're both trying to make it in the music industry. And the boy character in it is a rocker, and he starts having a little bit of success, but then what ends up happening is the music record companies take him. And here he was, he's a rocker. That was who he was. That's the kind of music he liked to play. That's how he liked to dress. And they really took him and said, no, you're going to be in this boy band, right? If you want to, have success, be on our label, we're going to put you in this boy band with these other people. Put him in costumes, made him, act certain ways. And what he realized very quickly is that's not who he was, right? It's not who he was. And eventually he breaks away from that and kind of goes back to his roots. But I think it's a great way of showing how sometimes we feel like we have to fit a certain model. We have to live a certain formula in order to have success, when really success is being who you are. Learning who you are, unashamedly being uniquely you, because here's the truth. There's nobody else in the world like you. There's nobody else in the world like you. In fact, there's nobody in all of the galaxies and universes just like you, right? You're uniquely you, and we need you to be uniquely you. Imagine all of the great art, all of the great music, all of the things that have been, created and invented in this world. Imagine if those people had not been who they were, right? And some of us think of these people as being crazy. That's okay, right? Because, crazy is just one side of genius in a way. Look at people like Nikola Tesla. He was consumed with what he was doing, right? And look at the different inventions and other things that we have because of who he was. And he chose to stay who he was. He lived in poverty the end of his life because he would not conform to what other people wanted him to do. And consequently, he was shunned, he was pushed out of a lot of the community. But how grateful I am, and we should be, for his contribution. So how about you, right? I'm sure that there's a contribution that you can make in this world. Are you making it in the way that you and only you can make it? Or are you just trying to be somebody else, copying somebody else, living safe, doing what you're told to do? Or are you being actually authentic to who you are and bringing to this world what this world needs from you, right? So anyway, I'm going to wrap up for today. But again, just some things for you to consider. How authentic are you being? Do you want to be more authentic? Right? Are you copying other people? Are you making things your own? Do you feel the need to show up a certain way or only say things in a certain way to make sure that other people like you? Or are you doing things because that's the way you want to do it? That's who you want to be. That's, how you want to live your life. So as I promised, there's going to be more about this in the future. But again, if you're one of those people that wants to be more authentic, like this, comment below, follow other videos that I do on this in the future, because I'm going to share more about my journey as well. And hope if you'd like to be on this journey too, that you do. And we go on this journey together. So with that, happy Saturday, because today happens to be Saturday. And we'll see you on the next video.